Ciao, I'm Chiara from Italian Climate Network.
Hi, I'm Harry from the UK Youth Climate Coalition.
In this video, we want to introduce what the Green New Deal means and how we can make it work together.
Currently, there are several Green New Deals in development, such as in the European Union, South Korea, and more. However, they all refer to something that came from the USA.
The inspiration comes from the American New Deal that helped in solving the Great Depression of the 1930s. The Green New Deal must enable the shift to zero-emission societies while also creating a green recovery from the coronavirus recession.
To explain what the Green New Deals all have in common, let's divide it into its components. So first, it is green, as we tackle both the climate and biodiversity crisis by staying on track with the Paris Agreement, preventing extinction, and moving towards environmental regeneration.
Secondly, it is new. We reset and renew the commitment to citizens, youth, and workers for a just transition. This means solidarity with people while we are stopping polluting activities. And lastly, it is a deal, meaning that we set an inclusive and holistic plan, not a single policy. This implies having a cross-cutting approach between sectors and social challenges, ensuring intersectionality to achieve climate justice and protect human rights.
That sounds nice, but the question is, how can we ensure Green New Deals in all countries and offer the green recovery our and future generations deserve? We have to build broad alliances to make sure youth groups are key stakeholders in shaping green recovery policy with a Green New Deal. Then, we have to form watch groups and ensure our decision makers keep aligning their recovery plans with the Green New Deal.
Right now, youth is still being excluded in many areas of the green recovery decisions. So it is time to act collectively on the Green New Deal locally and internationally.
Thanks for watching.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Youth for Climate Live series. We are so glad that you could join us today, and I would love to have you also join us on the video wall. So please do turn on your cameras so we can see you. And thanks so much for letting us know where you're joining in from. The results of the poll show that we have a truly global audience with participants from nearly every continent. So thank you so much. Good to see you. If you're here for the first time, you can learn more about the series by going to our website, youthforclimate.live. My name is Salina Abraha, and I'm one of your hosts for this series, and I'm lucky to not have to do this alone.
Hi, everyone. I'm your other host. I'm Ahmed Badr. Thank you so much for joining us. We really want to make sure that this is as dynamic of a conversation as it could be, something that is ongoing. So please make sure to share your thoughts by using the hashtag #YouthForClimateLive. And before we get started, just a little housekeeping. This whole session is being translated into Italian. So if you want to switch to Italian, just change the language below. So last month, we launched this series with conversation with some amazing youth leaders at the forefront of climate advocacy. And you can check out an overview of our launch session in the Lowdown blog. The link for that will be sent in the chat shortly. And please do keep checking the chat throughout the session for different updates. And you can also watch the whole episode on our website, which again is youthforclimate.live. So last session, we had nearly 500 attendees from 86 countries, and we're so excited to keep this momentum going. So without further ado, Selena, what are we focusing on today?
Today, we are talking about the topic you all voted on, which is how can we recover sustainably from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic? So COVID-19 and climate change might seem to be very different challenges, but because one is a health crisis, the other is environmental, but they actually do have a lot in common.
They're both global challenges that travel across national boundaries. And because of that, solving them requires strong coordination on the global level. And they also require urgent action on a large scale. And so today we'll learn about how our responses to this pandemic can help us prevent another global crisis.
Exactly. We have a packed schedule for today, so we're going to jump right in. First up, we have a message from Italian Minister for Environment, Land and Sea, Minister Costa.
Al centro delle agende dei governi e delle organizzazioni internazionali vi è oggi la ricostruzione delle economie che hanno subito il duro impatto della crisi sanitaria. Prima del Covid-19, con l'azione climatica ci prefiggevamo di cambiare i paradigmi di produzione e consumo. orientandoli nella direzione della sostenibilità e della neutralità climatica. Ora ci ritroviamo in un immenso cantiere dove dobbiamo ricostruire e questa è una grande opportunità. Possiamo scegliere se ripartire dalla casella in cui eravamo rimasti oppure se fare uno sforzo per un nuovo salto in avanti e per farlo tutti insieme senza lasciare mai indietro nessuno. Noi vogliamo andare verso il futuro. I governi stanno intervenendo significativamente nella ricostruzione a sostegno dei tessuti produttivi e a beneficio di una forza lavoro tanto duramente colpita dalla crisi quanto preziosa per la ripartenza. Questi ingenti stimoli devono instradare la ricostruzione verso un nuovo modello economico sostenibile, protettivo ed inclusivo. Le scelte che come decisori politici compiamo oggi modelleranno il mondo, l'ambiente, le prospettive di domani. E il domani appartiene più di tutti a voi giovani. Voi sarete i protagonisti dello Youth for Climate che con la Pre-COP organizzeremo a Milano dal 28 settembre al 2 ottobre 2021. Il webinar di oggi permetterà ai molti giovani che si connettono da tutti i continenti al live series di ascoltare e naturalmente di intervenire cosa si sta immaginando a livello globale, a livello europeo e a livello italiano. Partiamo dall'Italia, dal Ministero dell'Economia e delle Finanze e ascolterete ora le nostre idee e proposte. Buon dibattito.
Thank you to Minister Costa for sharing so clearly the vision behind a sustainable recovery. It's also great to hear that the pre-COP is now confirmed for September 30th to October 2nd next year in Milan, and that we will also host an official Youth for Climate Driving Ambition event. I'd now like to invite a speaker to this stage. It is my pleasure to introduce the Director General of the Italian Ministry of Economy and Finance, Fabrizia Lapecorella. Welcome, Director General. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Salima. Thank you. Let me thank Minister Costa for having involved me in this initiative. And let me say that it is an honor and a pleasure to be connected and virtually close to so many of you located in so many different places, all eager to discuss the answer to one key question. What will our future and the future of our economy look like after the pandemic crisis? My answer to this question is that the effects of the COVID-19 crisis have been so pervasive and so prolonged that there is no room to imagine that we can go back to business as usual. This is the window of opportunity opened up by the crisis, an opportunity that we will exploit to design and implement the policies needed to take back the Italian economy on the path of sustainable growth. A full-fledged set of actions will be contained in the recovery and resilience plan on which the Italian government is currently working. And the framework for that plan is provided for by our national reform program, a key component of the economic and financial programming process in Italy, just approved by the Council of Ministers on the 6th of July. The recovery strategy for the Italian economy develops along three directions and has one important green dimension: ecological transition. Ecological transition is seen as being at the basis of a new development model on a global basis, with the awareness that to start the ecological transition, we first need to significantly reduce emissions of greenhouse gas in line with the objective of the EU Green Deal. Second, we aim at improving the energy efficiency of our economy and the air quality in urban areas. Third, we want to clean up internal sea waters. Ecological transformation, that is a conversion towards sustainable and circular business models, will also mean new and more favorable competitive conditions for our businesses, allowing gradually to restore the desired balance between the environment and the economy. Let me only add very quickly that these latest developments of the Italian policy agenda are entirely consistent with other important initiatives that the Italian government had undertaken before the COVID-19 crisis. This is, for instance, the Green and Innovation Deal, that is a plan financed with the 2020 budget, through which important incentives are provided for public and private investment that result in improving the energy efficiency of immovable properties, as well as that are provided to favor energy production from renewables and to foster technological innovation. The 2020 budget also provides for the issuance of green bonds. That is, this is a new and dedicated issuance of treasury bonds intended to finance the expenditures undertaken in order to achieve one or more environmental targets. Finally, before closing, just a word on the approach. We are fully aware that in order to make our policies for sustainable recovery effective, we need to ensure that the perspective is a long-term one and the approach is systematic. And this is what we aim to do. This is what we will do in order to avoid that the significant resources that will be shortly available through the new instrument Next Generation EU will not be wasted without producing the desired results in terms of environmental improvement and sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director General, for that thoughtful intervention. It's so important to think about sustainable recovery on the local and global levels. 2020 marks the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and even though COP26 has been postponed, this year is still an important year for achieving our climate goals. And this is actually something that COP25 President Carolina Schmidt can talk to us a little more about.
Dear friends, warm greetings from Chile. I hope you all are well and safe under the current circumstances. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic represents one of the biggest health crises in the human history, impacting people's lives in multiple serious ways. The pandemic may have postponed COP26, but in no way has postponed the need for parties to deliver the commitments they have made under the Paris Agreement, most notably the submission of more ambitious NDCs this year, 2020. In this spirit, last April, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, Chile presented a significantly enhanced NDC that, in line with the Paris Agreement, targets a long-term vision of carbon neutrality by 2050. Our new NDC represents a critical milestone on this path, committing to an absolute carbon budget for the period 2020-2030 and a series of other measures spanning mitigation, adaptation, and integrative actions on oceans, forests, circular economy, finance, and nature-based solutions, as well as a social pillar. Presenting enhanced NDCs this year is more important than ever, because NDC's commitments actually act as a beacon to guide the social and economic recovery after the COVID crisis. They offer a framework to orient efforts towards a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the pandemic. Green recovery efforts provide a huge opportunity to accelerate our transformation to a low-carbon and resilient economy, with a social focus generating new jobs and creating opportunities for the communities in their territories. It is critical that we focus our investments in areas that have a greater social and environmental impact for most vulnerable people, such as renewable energies, energy and water efficiency, sustainable building and infrastructure, electromobility, and nature-based solutions. In this context, the work undertaken with and by youth is crucial to raise the ambition of their governments in their climate change strategies and plans. Today's young people generations occupies a unique point in history Young people around the world are actively engaged in efforts to address climate change. In Chile, our youth has been involved in the participatory process of our climate change framework law and now actively participate in the elaboration process of our long-term climate strategy. I encourage you to keep up with your commitment to climate action, and I invite you to take this opportunity to build back better and to push together for a green recovery.
Thank you, Minister Schmidt, for the show of commitment to increase climate action and the reminder that we also, as young people, should maintain our momentum and our commitment. I want us now to dive in deeper into the realities that countries and governments are facing today. As Minister Costa had referenced, countries are experiencing deep economic crises due to COVID-19, and the decisions that are made now are crucial. We can either choose to reinforce existing systems, or we can begin to build new ones. And we all know that in many cases, the first isn't an option. We must have a post-COVID recovery that propels us to greener economies and onto a sustainable path. And I'm happy to share that we now have the chance to hear directly from an individual who is leading the front. I'm happy to introduce the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to welcome you to our stage.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to talk to you because for two reasons. First of all, we wouldn't have a Green Deal without your generation asking for it. Fridays for Future and other activists have pushed us into this direction, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Secondly, many of you are now experiencing the second serious crisis in your life. In your young lives, already twice, you were hit by a serious crisis. So I feel a strong responsibility, also as a dad, to make sure that we do everything we can in our power to make sure that when we recover in a way to give you a better world in your hands. And that is, I think, the essence of what we're trying to do now. As you know, the European Council decided earlier this week that we would have at our disposal at least 750 billion euros to do this recovery at the European level. And we have proposed that to use the European Green Deal as the basis for this recovery. Now, what does that mean very concretely? We will have to invest in changing the way we live. We have to invest in changing the way our economy is structured. We have to invest in changing the way we produce and consume food. We have to recreate a natural balance with our natural environment. These are incredible challenges in the middle of also a global economic revolution, an industrial revolution. So combining all these things. So what are we going to do concretely? Because I want to try and be as concrete as possible. We could talk perhaps about that in the questions and answers. First of all, we want to create a renovation wave. We want to help Europeans everywhere to change the way they live, to make sure they live in environmentally sound homes, change their energy mix, put solar panels on their roofs, insulate their houses, create another energy for the way they move. Make sure we get much better public transport. Make sure there are bike lanes in our cities. Make sure that we make it easier for people to walk around instead of taking a car. Make sure that we have zero emission public transport everywhere. Make sure that we create a circular economy where we stimulate economic growth on the basis of reusing and recycling the primary products we use in our production. Make sure that we prevent the disappearance of 1 million species, which is imminent if we don't act very, very quickly. And if these species disappear, then also agriculture has a very, very bleak future. I want to end on a more international note, starting from Europe. You know, the beauty of the UN system is, with all its faults, is that we now have a plan. And it was there before the epidemic. It was there before the pandemic. We have SDGs as the basis for the future of how the world should move to a sustainable society. The Sustainable Development Goals formulate clearly for the world where we need to go. And if we keep that as our guiding principle and make sure it is fully coordinated with the European Green Deal, then we can achieve this. We can do this. So let me leave you with this one thought. This is going to be hellishly complicated. Hellishly complicated. We're going to see a lot of unemployment in the months to come. We're going to see people becoming desperate people becoming angry, but this can be done. We can fix this, and we can fix this also because of you, because I know your energy, your creativity. You are the healthiest, the strongest, the best educated generation in human history. With your help, we can achieve this transformation so that we leave you with a better world. Thank you.
Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Timmermans. Thank you so much. And again, it's so encouraging to hear how optimistic you are, and then especially in acknowledging the role of young people in bringing this up to the surface, and as collaborators. And so in that vein, can you tell us to what extent the EU Green Deal will impact the future of young people, and what is our role going to be? It'll also be great to hear how youth will be involved in its implementation.
Well, first of all, let's not kid ourselves. When this economic crisis is going to hit harder and harder, which is what we're going to see in the next couple of months, who are going to be the first to lose their jobs? Young people. Who are going to be the most impacted because after finishing their studies, they will struggle to find a job? Young people. You know why I know this so well? I was your age in the early 1980s, and everybody like me who came out of university was unemployed. And I remember the heartache that gave, and I remember the desperation we felt. So we need to make sure, with your help, that we get the economy going quickly again. And you will be extremely needed in this new economy because it's a different economy. It's an economy based on creativity. It's an economy based on connectivity. And it's an economy based on service and, I would say, on innovation. And for all of that, you need young people. It's not my generation that's going to do that, it's your generation. But you then have to have a stake in it. So how do we create a stake in it? I keep telling you, be politically engaged. I don't even care which party. As long as you become politically engaged, you might not like the political system as it is now, but if you want to change it, you have to go into it first. And that's what I really urge you to do. Secondly, we will create structures like the Climate Pact, where you have a voice and a say. And I promised you here today that the Climate Pact will have an important opening and position for young people, for you guys, so that you can really bring in your thoughts on this. If I meet Fridays for Future people all the time and other young people, I'm always amazed at the level of knowledge and commitment that you bring to the table. And I need you in the Climate Pact. So we will make sure that you will be well represented there.
Thank you, Mr. Timmermans. And again, it's an honor to be on this journey together. I think the collaboration is going to be a key aspect here. And thank you for the encouraging words. As someone who graduated in May, with all of the uncertainty that's upon us now, it's really encouraging to hear that there is a plan in place and that young people are at the forefront at the highest levels of government. So thank you so much for that. And again, it's so encouraging to see a youth advocate at the highest levels of government. So thank you again. And so now that we have a sense of how Europe is stepping up to meet the challenges of COVID-19 and climate change, we'd love to zoom out and look at how this is being discussed on the global level.
That's a great point. I'm not sure if you've heard, but the United Nations Secretary General outlined 6 priority actions that countries can take in order to recover better together.
And here today to tell us more about these 6 priority areas, as well as his agency's Climate Promise Initiative, is Achim Steiner, Administrator of the United Nations Development Program. Mr. Steiner, thank you for joining us.
Ahmed, Salina, thank you very much for the invitation. In my 5th month of lockdown here in New York, this is one of those moments that I look forward to. Your energy, the fact that you guys still keep the conversation going under these very trying circumstances is a morale booster. So first of all, thank you for that. And, to follow Minister Costa and Fabrizia Lapecorella and Carolina Schmidt and now Frans Timmermans is also an illustration of how far we have come. Here are 4 people who are in central positions of influencing what happens next. And look at the focus, look at the priority that climate change, the green economy, the green recovery, are getting in the discussions that people are having all over the world. And I think that's the first thing that I want to just share with all of you who are listening in this morning. yes, we are in a state of paralysis to some extent, but it is no reason to either not continue to call for action and secondly to engage with one another. And also the event this morning, the Youth for Climate series, is a great antidote to what otherwise is a very frustrating moment, because there is no climate conference this year. We are not able to see Fridays for Future on the streets. We are not able to see many people acting and doing things that need to be done. So let me just say that I think here in the United Nations and with the Secretary General as the #1 advocate for action on climate change, we remain fully focused on this. And you have seen the Secretary General speak over the last few months, not only to the challenge of COVID-19, but particularly how this recovery could in fact be an opportunity to perhaps accelerate action and come out of this, yes, with a very dramatic drop in human well-being, with economic crisis, but also an opportunity to do a great deal more and to in fact accelerate action on climate change. It may seem a distant prospect right now, but you know, you just heard Frans Timmermans speak. I mean, $750 billion. This is a package that nobody would have dreamt of even discussing just 6 months ago. And here Europe is focused on a Green New Deal. So I think these are the opportunities that hopefully will make young people, first of all, retain their confidence that you actually can shape and influence what happens next, and you are doing it. In the United Nations, we obviously see our role not so much on the streets, so to speak, but very much helping countries and governments to now prepare for action. And the Secretary General's 6 areas, I won't repeat them in detail here now, but particularly his calls also on phasing out coal-fired power, looking at energy subsidies, taking out the distortions that Frans Timmermans spoke to about just now in our economies, could be the tools with which we actually make a recovery become an accelerator towards a low carbon economy. And in UNDP, we embraced with the Secretary General's Climate Summit last year a responsibility both as an institution, but also personally. My colleagues in UNDP made a climate promise that we would help over 100 countries to explore how they could raise their ambition for their national climate strategies, the so-called NDCs, by the time that they come together after 5 years of Paris having committed to do so. Right now, I'm very proud to say we've gone beyond 100. We're actually engaged with 112 countries with many partners, the NDC Partnership, the World Bank, the United Nations Environment Programme, the Food and Agriculture Organization. We are working as teams at the country level to help countries address precisely the complexity that you heard about. And Carolina Schmidt's example from Chile is just one reality. This repeats itself across 160 developing countries. But we have to now act on this. And that is why also in UNDP, we see it as critical that we do not just look at climate change as something that is in its own cocoon. It is one of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The other 16 are fundamental to enabling climate change action to succeed, just as climate change action is about also helping to reduce poverty, give people access to clean electricity, give them jobs. And that is the role that I see, particularly for UNDP, to help countries, but also to help all of us to understand that climate change is an issue in its own right, but it is integral to human well-being. It is the future of development choices that we must make. And in that spirit, trust me, in our offer to countries right now to cope with this extraordinary crisis of COVID-19, human, social, and economic, we have just put forward our offer to help countries. And one of the 4 areas we have identified is the green economy, linking climate change, biodiversity, ecosystems, pollution, essentially rethinking our economies in this recovery. Back to you.
It's amazing to hear. I think also for us is we think about how we align as young people, how crucial collaboration is at a global scale, and knowledge sharing, capacity building, and bringing together young people from all sectors. And that's why we were really, it's important that this discussion is something that is built. And so today we're actually building on an event recently hosted by one of our partners, the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And the event provided a forum for young climate leaders to share their priorities for how to recover better together directly with UN member states.
And young people at the event wanted to know how countries are involving them in decision-making about climate change and green recovery from COVID-19.
So, Mr. Steiner, we wanted to ask, you shared that UNDP is supporting countries in updating NDCs, increasing climate action. Can you tell us how you've seen young people included in these processes within their own countries? And are there ways that UNDP is encouraging their inclusion?
Well, let me put it in a slightly differentiated way. I think many young people are pushing through the front doors, they're climbing in through the windows of the corridors of power. And in that sense, they are claiming their place and their territory there because, yes, governments and institutions of government are not necessarily very amenable to young people suddenly having a seat at the table. But I think things have changed dramatically. Many countries now include youth representatives in their delegations to the climate conference, in national debates. And certainly in our work with countries, for example, on these national climate strategies, we are working very hard to ensure that young people have a way to find a seat at the table, but also to share their perspective, which by definition is going to be different than those who are already in offices of governments or the private sector. But for us in UNDP, this is something that is also about creating the space in the broader governance and democratic process. That's why UNDP has a global youth program. We work across the world with hundreds of projects in strengthening the capacity of youth to get engaged. I mean, whether it is in youth leadership programs, whether it is through funding youth organizations with GEF small grants programs on climate change, supporting a youth academy for climate change in Panama, promoting youth-led entrepreneurship in the Asia Pacific, or through also engaging them in Nigeria and Zimbabwe right now, precisely in these national climate strategies. But we have to go further, and it has been one of my aspirations, and again, the Secretary General very much at the forefront of this, to create more formal space and engagement with young people. And here, I just want to draw your attention to perhaps a couple of initiatives that I think are very important and opportunities for those of you who are following today and millions of others to engage. We have created a platform called sparkblue.org and Youth for Climate, and it is a way of creating a conversation with you that immediately influences our next steps and planning. So if you don't remember the full address, just go into the web and look at sparkblue.org, and from there find your way into the youth dialogue. The second one is that we've actually established recently a call for global youth experts, a pre-scanned roster of youth experts who will be available to both our partner countries, but to us also to in fact be part of the expertise and the experts that will help countries shape their strategies in moving forward on climate change. And so this is all part of a, I think, also change in institutional culture. And I'm very proud that UNDP has so many young people in so many countries having the confidence and trust, because this takes your time, it takes your energy. And I know, it is sometimes frustrating to get involved, but my one plea before I step back from the screen here is, please don't let the current difficult times take away your energy or your hope. You can have frustration, you can be angry, but above all, don't lose hope and keep doing what you're doing, because otherwise we can't do what we are supposed to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner, for the hopeful message. It's so encouraging and exciting to see international agencies thinking about youth involvement in such engaging and thoughtful ways. And a theme that seems to be coming up through this conversation is, just how far we've come, but also how far we have to go. And I think through this series, we have an opportunity to check in on the progress, check in on the past, see where we are in the present, and look to the future and see what we can do there. So thank you so much for your insightful message and your insightful intervention. And so now I'd like to welcome Mr. Timmermans back. As it's time to meet three incredible youth climate leaders, Axell Sutton, Seble Samuel, and Jhannel Tomlinson. They'll help us approach sustainable recovery through their own respective lenses: clean energy, sustainable transport, and nature.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you. Welcome to the stage. And just to give the audience some context, Axell is a young energy engineer from Mexico and the founder of Climate Influencers, and he is working to drive green compensation and an energy transition. Seble is an Ethiopian-Canadian geographer, a climate justice advocate, and co-founder and organizer of Menged, Ethiopia's Open Streets movement. And lastly, we have Jhannel, who is a Caribbean climate activist, the co-founder of Young People for Action on Climate Change, and her work is centered on increasing the capacity of community-based organizations and female farmers. So we've got some incredible expertise here. If you have any questions for any of our speakers, you can ask them on social media. We'll be sharing their handles in the chat, and they will take some time to answer questions after this segment. So I think we can get it started.
Yeah, so Axell, we're really excited to hear more about your work. And my first question to you is, have you seen conversations about clean energy deployment in Latin America change after COVID-19? And how would you like to see countries take advantage of this moment to accelerate decarbonization?
Mille, è un piacere stare qui. Grazie Sergio Costa del governo italiano per l'invito e grazie all'inviato di Giovani Mondiale per aver possibile questo. And well, now that I have present my Italian, I will pass to answer the question. Being the co-chairman of the Latin American Student Energy Summit, one of the most important tasks that I carry out is a contact with the young energy leaders of the region. So I could define that we live a very marked polarity on this sustainable recovery. We have the case of Chile, which is already starting its national plan of green hydrogen, in which they are working with 65 institutions, enterprises, and universities to define together and push into actions to develop clean industry. Mexico, that in the middle of the climate crisis, builds a new refinery and invests in the purchase of coal and the use of heavy fuel, all to electrify the country. It is obvious that we are detached from what is taught to what is done. Something that I really want to share with Latin American countries about how to take advantage on this isn't the big clean energy push in which we have to jump. Improving new green policies, creating framework with youth, policymakers, academic experts, and politicians from all over the region, collaborating with civil society and citizens, because we live in different contexts, but we share transversal climate issues, and this is why the NDCs process are so important to climate change. And this is why the actualization is playing a very important role for the future of the planet and the next generations. For example, in Latin America, it is possible that a total decarbonization existing 2050 will create benefits such as 7 million new permanent jobs and 28 million jobs in temporary segments related to green technologies, sustainable infrastructure, or transport electrification. Establishing a tax or salary on the price of CO2 will serve to give a clear economic signal towards reducing emissions and recover funds to contribute to RID. Modernize energy systems by promoting the use of cleaner energy and driving energy efficiency along the way have a big opportunity to do this on this. We have invested in energy storage, transmission, distribution networks, and renewable energy production. We have to empower smart energy efficiency technology to achieve a fair and a healthy transition for coal-dependent regions. We have to think beyond the new normality and start to create the new reality, switch our process and start to adapt ourselves to this, starting to understand the connection that energy has with climate, public health, and biodiversity, exploring how our basic energy needs are dependent on carbon fuels and why it is so toxic for our life. I invite you to look beyond the plug and begin to visualize the entire path that energy takes when it reaches your home and the consequences that our comfort has. We have a race to win for all life forms on the planet. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Axell, for your insightful feedback. I think it's so important to talk about collaboration across multiple levels. And as Mr. Steiner said earlier, we have to think about this issue in an intersectional way. The Sustainable Development Goals, intersect in so many different ways, and we have to recognize that and bring in all of our different stakeholders in this vein.
Yeah, I think this is a great time actually to kind of bring in and talk Seble and talk about sustainable transport. And this is something I'm going to learn about now. So Seble, can you tell us more about Menged and how this open streets movement has been affected by COVID-19? Has the pandemic shifted the conversations about planning for sustainable transport in Addis Ababa? What can you tell us about what's going on now?
Yes, definitely. So Menged means streets for people in Amharic, and it's Ethiopia's open streets or car-free day movement. And it kicked off in 2018 because of a mix of different factors. In my case, I've lived many years in Latin America, where the Ciclovia movement was first born, and I was really excited to have something similar take place in Ethiopia. So in that same year, in 2018, I participated in the first Open Streets Exchange for African Cities. It took place in Cape Town and was organized by Open Streets Cape Town. And when I was there, I met city officials from Addis Ababa who were really keen to have something similar happening on the ground in Ethiopia. And there was also really strong momentum coming from the former Minister of Health, who was pushing for car-free days to kind of fuse the ideas of public health and active living. So since it kicked off in 2018, Menged has really flourished, with now thousands participating every month, and it's been amazing to see it grow. So it normally takes place across 7 of Addis Abeba's 10 sub-cities every single month, stretching around 15 different kilometers of the city. And it's even spreading to other cities, including Jimma, Bahir Dar, and Mekelle. And in fact, the March edition was supposed to take place in every single region of Ethiopia with strong backing from the Ministry of Transport, but the pandemic got in the way. So the idea behind Menged Lesso is really to reimagine urban mobility in Ethiopia, one that is prioritizing sustainability, ecological sustainability, safe streets, social connection and healthy living, and really providing visions of what cities that are prioritized for people can become. And obviously the pandemic has really slowed Menged Lesso in its tracks because we haven't been able to organize or hold our monthly programming given the huge turnout of thousands of people that normally come. But I think the momentum of Menged Lesso has provided strong community engagement and policy advocacy to create an appetite for non-motorized mobility and sustainable mobility that really transcends the pandemic. So for example, one of the most popular Menged Lesso locations was selected by the former deputy mayor as the site of an interim cycling corridor to support the city's non-motorized transport strategy. And just last month on World Bicycle Day, the Minister of Transport launched Ethiopia's non-motorized transport strategy. So between the capital city's NMT strategy and the national one, there's the target of building over 1,000 kilometers of pedestrian infrastructure and walkways and around 500 kilometers of cycling lanes by the end of the decade. And also in September, Menged Lesso will be teaming up with London Car Free Day to host the World Car Free Day Summit, which will be digital this year, and will explore global actions around zero emissions mobility and streets for people. So obviously the pandemic has exposed that car-centric cities, in addition to the air pollution, the traffic jams, the vehicle fatalities, they're not resilient to the pandemic. And in fact, there's so much pop-up cycling infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure that's really reclaiming road space in cities across the world to ensure movement that's physically distanced and also have communities be more resilient to the pandemic. So I think there's huge potential for this in Ethiopia and across African cities where the modal share of people who walk or cycle or take public transit or collective transit dominate the streets, and actually cars are a minority. And so this pop-up cycling infrastructure and the pedestrian infrastructure has the chance to make cities and communities more resilient to the pandemic, but also it incorporates the idea of transport and spatial justice by planning for the majority and of course with the central component of sustainability. So I think Menged Lesso is a really important catalyst in showing what such cities that prioritize people can become. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's actually so inspiring to hear how cities can be built for people, and not only people, but our well-being and the environment. And I'm sure that all the young people who are joining right now are feeling inspired to start their own open streets movement. The pandemic has shown us that really life can be different than what it was before. And so when we talk about building back better, the recovery, that this is a central piece. So thank you so much for having us. I guess we can now go to Jhannel, our last youth speaker.
Yeah, so Jhannel, your work focuses on community-based adaptation in rural Jamaica, but you're also active in national and international climate dialogues. Have you seen COVID-19 change the conversation about how humans interact with nature? And if so, do you see this new context reflected in your country's climate change or recovery planning?
So first off, I must say that COVID has in fact underscored the kind of relationships between people, nature, and especially the climate. And it has contributed somewhat, and I'll explain why I say somewhat, to the conversation about humans interacting with nature, particularly at the national level and within and among young people. We see increasing conversations of this nature, but in other spaces, not so much. And the conversations, particularly by young people, we've seen it through the increasing virtual events looking at COVID and climate change and how it has impacted a lot of the natural resources. We've seen our climate change division as well sort of focus on utilizing the space to speak to the connections and intersectionalities that exist within the space as well. And based on these ongoing conversations, I think that COVID has highlighted three things, particularly where nature is concerned. Firstly, it's shown that as humans, we have a dysfunctional relationship with nature. Secondly, it has shown that our economic systems have put a lot of pressure on our natural resource base. And finally, it has shown light on the sort of ripple effect that we see that is triggered when one aspect of our interconnected system is disrupted. So we have seen where, because of what has happened with COVID, there's so many repercussions that have been seen in the agricultural sector, in energy, in transport. And again, it just shows the importance of us as humans, so also ensuring that we conserve on our natural resource. So yes, while COVID has sparked some conversations primarily among the youth and individuals who are already in the climate space, among other groups, and particularly those in rural communities, I wouldn't say that there has been a strong connection with COVID and the need to kind of strengthen our interactions with the environment. And again, this is because there's a lot of information that has sort of encouraged individuals to focus, I guess, more on the climate connections and less on COVID, because for them, climate change is something that they think has potential to affect them and their livelihoods more. And yes, while COVID has had some repercussions, I think climate is prioritized in this aspect. So at the national level here in Jamaica, some attention has been paid and is currently being paid to nature. And we've seen this in our revised NDC. And I'm happy to say that Jamaica is the first Caribbean country that submitted its revised NDC. And in that, there have been increased intention to kind of broaden the scope and include land use change and the forestry sector as sectors that weren't included before, and to focus essentially on emissions and how we seek to reduce emissions. So this step is something that I think is useful and will prove useful in the future, especially as we seek to reduce the emissions from our natural resource base. And as it relates to our COVID economic recovery plan, we have seen some amount of attention being paid, particularly to increasing resilience, looking at climate proofing our current infrastructure, looking at climate smart energy, and looking at how we can seek to improve our current energy mix. But I do think that more robust mechanisms need to be put in place, particularly with the engagement and forward post-COVID, because a lot of the conversations that I've heard thus far is the fact that young people are the individuals who are often most vulnerable to these shocks and stresses, whether it be COVID, whether it be climate change. As such, there needs to be that space for inclusion where we seek to add our voice, and not just a voice that where there is tokenism, where we're given a space at the table, but where we're given the opportunity to share our ideas and to see them through to implementation. So yes, I have seen increasing conversation in certain spaces, and I have seen where Jamaica has in fact included nature more in its post-COVID economic recovery plan, as well as in our revised NDCs moving forward. And I do also see where there's a recommendation for the greater inclusion of youth as we seek to move forward. And as Selena mentioned, to build back better. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Jhannel. Your work is so important. And I think, I really appreciate you shedding light on the response. COVID-19 has shown us which systems are vulnerable and which systems we really have to really focus on explicitly as we move forward towards sustainable recovery. So thank you so much for your intervention.
Yeah, it's been amazing to hear from so many different perspectives, and these different experiences are absolutely crucial to building this conversation, because we are trying to recover better, and this requires all of our experiences, both in generations and across sectors. And now we'd like to invite the audience to guide us through this next segment, because you have a voice as well. Our young guests have some questions for both Mr. Timmermans and Mr. Steiner. And we basically need your help in picking the question that you think we should ask. You should be seeing a poll pop up with 3 potential questions. Please vote for the one you feel most passionate about, and one of the youth leaders will ask Mr. Steiner and Mr. Timmermans that question. But do think and pick quickly, because we don't have a whole lot of time. And I'm just really grateful for this series and the fact that we are all in conversation together. And part of having this dialogue is talking to people from different continents, different experiences, generations, and this beautiful mix of listening and sharing. And so I'm very grateful to all of you for being able to participate in this dialogue, and as well as the audience for your patience with us as we're going through all of this, and your active participation. So please do let us know. I can't wait to kind of find out what the audience has chosen. Ahmed, do you think we have an answer yet?
I think we're still working on it, but like you said, I think it's so important to highlight these dialogues and highlight them in really thoughtful and engaging ways. I am just getting the answers now, and it seems like it was very, very close. Let's see. We had the first two questions, were very, very close together, but, question 2, Axell, would you like to answer? The floor is yours.
Okay. There is a big difference between what we're saying we will do and what we are really doing for sustainable recovery. How can the European Commission and UNDP support youth movements to close this gap within their regions?
I'm not sure which one of our speakers want to answer first, but you both have the opportunity to respond. Mr. Timmermans?
Okay. I think what we need to be is as concrete as possible, especially on those issues that young people care about a lot. So if we do our renovation wave, what does this mean for jobs? Because, you guys are great, but you're all very highly educated. But there's hundreds of millions of young people out there who are not highly educated, but also need a job. If we do this renovation wave, and we show clearly that this leads to jobs for small and medium-sized enterprises all over the European Union. If we do change in cities, the mix of public transport and make sure it becomes completely decarbonized, this immediately leads to a lot of jobs. If we do pick up this idea we had at the European Commission to plant 3 billion trees in the next 10 years, this can immediately lead to a direct engagement of many young people. If we do, Ethiopia was part of the discussion here. If we do create decentralized energy sources through solar and wind in more remote communities in Ethiopia, we do something actively that has a huge impact on people's lives and gives them the opportunity to be economically self-sustained, which is part of human dignity, I would say. So I would make it as concrete as possible, taking us into the future by concrete steps where young people are directly engaged.
You want me to jump in, Salina?
Yeah, feel free.
Well, I think first of all, to Axell and Seble and Jhannel, thank you very much. Great examples, and it is precisely these examples that are growing out of the community on the one hand, but also then begin to touch where I think governments and policy and those who have the possibility to invest begin to listen. And I think this is to Axell's question also that you spoke about with infrastructure and the choices that we make. I think right now, as an institution, we in UNDP, I think, have invested already significantly in creating a program that is explicitly targeting young people to become more engaged in our work, but also to help governments create platforms where they have more possibilities to become engaged. And I would make an invitation to all of you, if you ever feel in your country that BP could be a partner that you want to relate to, or that perhaps we have not done something that we should, please reach out to our resident representatives, to our teams, because sometimes it takes a conversation to open one's eyes to possibilities. But I think we are also living in these COVID-19 times. We need to be creative. Many people, and we estimate UN, 1.2 billion people are not able to attend school right now. Can we create other ways in which we can first deal with this issue of education? Because information and education are, in a sense, a precondition for being able to become active and to do things. And just to give you one more example, we're also experimenting right now. We have to learn as an institution to learn to work differently with young people. And we launched something called Mission 1.5. And I don't know how many of you have a sense of how many people are involved in gaming, in this universe of gaming. Now, every young person in theory who has access to broadband and to a device has probably played games. And yet it's not just young people, it's also adults. But 2.7 billion people have gaming engagements. And so Mission 1.5 is a kind of game that we have developed, but it is very much one that also tries to bring the climate change challenge and, most importantly, choices literally to someone's device where they can engage, they can have fun, but they can also learn and they can begin to appreciate what Frans said earlier on. There are choices we need to make. There are difficult choices to be made. Axell knows in Mexico right now, your government has for a moment suspended investment in renewable energy in order to stabilize the fossil fuel sector industry. That's a choice, and that choice needs to be debated. And there are thousands of these choices around the world. We see our role, and that's where we are investing right now, to make young people, first of all, have less of a barrier to entry in terms of these discussions, and secondly, to have more information at their disposal so that they can both bring their perspective, but also an appreciation of the choices that are available or need to be created. And I think that energy that you bring combined with these opportunities will change the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. So, as we're wrapping this up, again, it's such an honor to be able to speak to both of you and to our youth speakers. Lastly, any final remarks, Mr. Timmermans or Mr. Steiner, anything you'd like to leave us with as we wrap up this amazing conversation?
Well, there's one thing I would like to leave you with, because I have a lot of conversations like these. But I also increasingly see that a huge part of your generation is not a part of this conference. And my plea to you is to engage as much as you can with other members of your generation. I'll do and try and do the same, but please leave, if you are serious about leaving no one behind, you have to start a conversation with people you usually perhaps don't talk to. This is something we all need to do, but it's especially very important in your generation, because otherwise the cleavages and divisions in our society can no longer be bridged. And this is one of my biggest worries today. So this is the plea I want to leave you with. Leave no young person, even if you don't talk to them today, look them up, start a conversation, even if they don't agree with you. What's the fun in only talking to people you agree with? It's a lot more fun to talk to people you disagree with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mr. Steiner?
From my side, just perhaps the appeal that embrace COVID-19 in its full implications, one with empathy for the enormous stress that so many people are currently facing, and many hundreds of millions literally facing an existential threat. So in taking the climate change agenda forward, in mobilizing our communities, we have to reframe part of our conversation. It starts with empathy, but it also starts with creativity. And then let's get very, very focused. The greatest opportunity for recovering in an economic sense, but also in the future of development pathways we choose from this COVID-19 crisis, will actually be in a green economy transition. These are the shovel-ready projects that can help the poorest of the poor gain access to electricity. These are the kinds of infrastructure choices that can make life better for those who live in very polluted areas. I think COVID-19, difficult as it may be right now to imagine this, may become the greatest accelerator to a journey that has begun and that is gaining pace, but that is far behind where it should be. And that is rightly the reason why so many of you and so many of us are frustrated. But actually there is progress, and now we have a moment that history books will be written about. The year 2020 is a turning point. Let's hope it's a turning point for the better. And I certainly put my money on you as being key drivers in this, and certainly will help me to do my job better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining us. This is such an insightful conversation. I think we've all taken something special away from this. And I just want to thank all of our audience as well for being here. Your work in leadership is really important. We're lucky to have you. And I think one takeaway I have from this is that we have a deep responsibility, and we shouldn't feel burdened by this, but emboldened by it as a generation. Apparently we are the most educated, we're the most connected, and we have an opportunity to build a stronger society for ourselves, for our children, for the future we want to build. So yeah, I hope we can all take away the challenge of conversing with people we haven't before, reaching out beyond what we're comfortable with. And there's so much to cover in an hour. This conversation did not cover it all, but we cannot stop the conversation. So please do make sure to ask the questions that you have to the youth speakers via social media. We also want to share a big thank you to our partners, the Italian Ministry for Environment, Land and Sea, Connect for Climate, and the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth for hosting us today. Please do follow them on social media. You can see their handles up on the screen now. And you can stay updated about all upcoming Youth for Climate live episodes coming up.
And again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been so exciting to hear all of your voices, all of your thoughts, and we want to keep this conversation going. You know, it's been so exciting to talk about the intersections around this in our own experiences, right? And so let's find those intersections and let's begin exploring them. And we hope that you found this session inspiring, and we want to hear more of your ideas. So please check out our question campaign launched just last month by the UN Youth Envoy. We're still accepting contributions until the end of July. All you need to do is record a short video saying what actions you would take if you were your country's Minister of Environment or Climate, and then you can share it on social media with the hashtag Youth for Climate Live. Thanks again.
And this is your opportunity to nominate someone as well. So get other people who are not in the conversation to come in and share their answers. We can't wait to see you all again next month for episode 3, Driving Youth Action, held on August 28th. You can actually go register now. So go visit the website, youthforclimate.live. Thank you everyone for joining us. Let's keep this going. We've definitely got this. See you next time.
See you next time.